I've been photographing weddings professionally for over 20 years and have collected a number of stories during that time. I've told some of them on this channel, but there are more. Some are shorter anecdotes and some are smaller moments, and I thought I'd share a few of them with you today. You can't make this stuff up. I've been a vendor at a number of wedding expos over the years, but I hadn't yet someone take their food samples that a venue in a neighboring booth was handing out, put their plate down in between my sample albums, and stand there by themselves having a spontaneous lunch. Maybe it's my fault for not making it more obvious that my tables and the objects upon them were display materials and not promotions or ads for a food court. Like many of you, when I was a child, I felt my parents were sometimes too strict about certain parenting obligations, including table manners. As an adult, you come to appreciate these lessons and understand their importance in the context of not only politeness, but also hygiene. Sample albums aren't cheap, so when I gently moved them aside to prevent her from getting saucy spillage on them, she gave me a look like I was the one violating the bonds that keep our society civil. One wedding I was photographing had trays upon trays of cupcakes laid out for dessert. They were a decent size with a generous amount of frosting on top, and the peaks they made had a nice symmetry to them as they were lined up on the table. People could come along and grab one at their leisure. One of the guests, a woman slightly older than me, didn't see me in the back of the room scanning for photo opportunities when she approached the cupcakes and, after looking around to make sure no one was watching, pinched the top of each cupcake, turning peaks into little hollows. When she would finish with one row, she would lick her fingers, then look around again to see if anyone was yet looking, and went down the next row. I just shook my head and walked away. When I again found myself near the cupcakes later, I saw that every last cupcake had its frosting peak pinched off, leaving sad little frosting craters. When you start out in this business, you typically find yourself photographing weddings for friends or coworkers, and I was no different. The very first wedding I was hired to photograph where I didn't previously know the couple or have a prior connection to them was one that started off my career with a good story. The bride's father wasn't originally scheduled to make a toast, but as he'd been drinking, his liquid courage brought him to his feet and he stood behind the couple and told quite the story. He held the microphone and told everyone there about the rocky road his daughter and her now husband had taken on their path to the altar. Included in his speech was a memory of him driving cross-country to pick up his crying daughter after that SOB, and he pointed to the now groom, had left his daughter and broken her heart. In his drunken roundabout way, I think he was trying to say true love conquers all or something, because here they are married, and isn't that grand? I do have photos of this toast with the bride and the groom each looking down and in opposite directions away from each other. The look on the groom's face was, I can't believe this is happening, and the look on the bride's face was, I'm going to kill him. Minutes later, I heard the staff laughing their heads off in the kitchen, each asking, did you hear that toast? Then a few minutes later, the DJ came over to tell me that the father-daughter dance had been canceled. My time ended shortly thereafter, so I never learned what the fallout from all of this was. Past that point, I don't know if the dad was sleeping things off in the backseat of a car somewhere, but I didn't see him for the remainder of the evening. During prep, some brides ask me to either leave the room or turn around when they're getting into their dress. Others don't mind at all. I always ask what their preference is because I never want to assume. One bride told me to stick around and photograph away. When the time came for her to get into her dress, one of her bridesmaids asked her, do you really want the photographer in here taking pictures of you nude? The bride's response was, I paid enough for these things, I'm going to show them off. I photographed one wedding where the venue was a converted barn. These can be very nice venues with the dark wood and atmosphere, and if you know how to light them, the photos can look fantastic. The problem with this barn venue was during the week it was an actual barn. The reception was held on the main level of the structure, cleaned up as best they could, but there was a lower level that opened into an adjacent field. On that lower level were many goats, which we could hear and, unfortunately, smell throughout the entirety of the evening. Another wedding I was photographing was a bit on the smaller side. It was held in the summer and it was very nice out. Unfortunately, the air conditioning in the venue wasn't working very well, so as the evening went on, more and more people went out on the patio than there were on the dance floor. I always feel kind of bad for the DJ when that happens because there they are working hard to create an entertaining evening and no one is dancing. With about an hour left, there were still a good number of people there, the majority of which were enjoying each other's company out on the patio. We could still hear the music because the doors were open and it was only a few feet away, when suddenly the music just stopped. Everyone kind of looked at each other wondering what was happening, like maybe the DJ accidentally pulled the plug out of the wall or something. It turns out the father of the bride got in the DJ's face and told him to stop the music, to shut it all down. Then he marched himself out of the building toward the parking lot. While the couple went inside to find out why the music stopped and Dad left the premises, the DJ looked as surprised as anyone else. He said there was no context to it, that the dad suddenly became that guy and, not wanting to be confrontational, turned off the music. He asked if he should keep going, and the couple looked at each other and shrugged and said, "Well, I guess the wedding's over." The DJ and I still had an hour left on the clock that we were paid for, but the couple said they were all set and we could leave. Not too long ago, I photographed a wedding for a couple of metalheads. I'm not a big metal guy myself, but I can appreciate the energy. They had a pretty unique song list during the reception and saved the best for last. I'm not up on my death metal, so I don't know the band nor the song, but the couple in their wedding party moshed like no one was watching. I usually wear earplugs during this part of the day and was especially glad I did here, because in addition to lyrics I couldn't understand, the couple in their wedding party clearly did and screamed them at each other at the top of their lungs like some metal-themed wedding battle cry. It was magnificent. I've worked with vendors who have been at this for a long time and some who are brand new. I'm not sure where this particular DJ landed, but I'm pretty sure he wasn't a veteran. I'm basing this on the music he was playing, which was moving the evening along well enough until the ad to upgrade his free Spotify account to an annual membership rang out through the speakers for all to hear. Then there was the wedding guest who spent the day and evening acting like he was the hired photographer. He stayed in the back during the ceremony, but during the reception went around the room photographing couples and setting up poses with guests. It got to the point where people started to think he was with me. I observed him to be a bit overbearing and trying to direct aspects of the day, which is decidedly not my style. He was wearing jeans and not looking at all like a professional. I can't be having people thinking that's how my staff acts nor dresses to photograph someone's wedding. I eventually had to confront him and say, "Dude, what's the story?" He told me he really wanted to photograph weddings, so he was going to photograph this one to start his portfolio. I gently explained that's not how these things worked. He seemed genuinely apologetic and didn't realize that was a breach of professional etiquette. Then he told me he was a friend of the DJ who told him it would be just fine if he came along to photograph the wedding. I then had words with the DJ and explained to him, a little less gently because he really should have known better, that that's ever so slightly unethical. I hadn't worked with this DJ before and honestly wouldn't remember if I ever saw him again, but he was pretty unapologetic about it. One couple wanted to make a show at the conclusion of their ceremony by using a saber to slice off the end of a champagne bottle. The groom wanted to make a particularly good presentation, but his first attempt didn't do the trick, so he put extra effort into his second swipe. He brought his arm way back and really went for it. In the moment, it happened quickly, so I don't know if he got too close to the bride with the saber or if it was the flying glass from the end of the champagne bottle, but she ended up with a cut on the back of her wrist. She reacted quickly enough, and while it did draw blood, she thankfully only needed a band-aid to continue on. She did tell the groom he was lucky that no blood got on the dress. Then there was the videographer who, instead of paying attention to the flow of the day, instead spent his time drinking with his girlfriend, who he brought along pretending to be a second shooter. There was one point during the night where they didn't think anyone could see them, but since I'm telling the story, clearly they failed, where my second shooter told me he saw them behind a divider making out. Prior to the wedding, I'd shared with him the itinerary I had put together after my final meeting with the couple, something which he himself didn't do. I wasn't going to interrupt their drinking, nor making out, nor otherwise do his job for him. During the time of the evening when we were supposed to be doing portraits, he was nowhere to be found, and later got in my face that I didn't stop everything I was doing, pause the schedule, and try to find him. His lack of self-awareness was truly amazing. It was a perfect example of someone who either can't or won't get their head in the game. And finally, I'll end with a happier story. The bride's brother was deployed overseas, and she hadn't seen him for over a year. Originally, he wasn't going to be able to make it to the wedding, which she was feeling kind of down about. Unbeknownst to her, arrangements were made so he could attend. Her parents told me about it in advance so I could be ready if she happened to see him during the ceremony. She didn't, and it wasn't until the receiving line where she did see him, and it was a great emotional moment. Thank you for watching. I appreciate your spending a few minutes with me. If you like this kind of video, please like and subscribe. Do you have any fun or interesting just when I thought I've seen it all stories? If so, feel free to share them in the comments below. If you'd like to see more videos like this, check out this other one I made for you. This is Ask a Wedding Photographer. I'm Seth K, and I'm here to help.